We're here for the making of Bonnie and Clyde. It's our current show that's going on right now. Some friends and family in the audience here tonight, and some up here, of course, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. Our dynamic costuming duo, Miss Marcy Wiegert. Also, we have Miss Sarah Porter, who's also Blanche in the production. We have Scott Miller, who's our artistic director for New Line and the director of the show. Rob Lippert is our set designer, lighting designer extraordinaire. Gabe Taylor is our stage manager and gun wrangler. And then we also have Jeffrey Carter, who's new this season, and he is our musical director. And he's absolutely wonderful. So welcome all. Thank you for joining us. First off, I like to start off these things. Those of you in the audience, I don't know, have you seen Bonnie and Clyde yet? You haven't seen it? Okay, you have. I'll try not to spoil anything for you so you can still come and see. But I like to start these off by just asking Scott, this is the first thing that always comes to mind. You always have these shows in your head, and what was the reason for picking this one? For picking Bonnie and Clyde to put in your season?
Because I knew everybody's head would explode when I told them we were doing a Frank Wildhorn show.
Yeah.
I saw it in New York. I saw the show in New York in 2010, I guess. I've always hated Frank Wildhorn musicals, but I loved this, and I thought it was really, really cool, and I couldn't wait to get the rights. And like most of the shows we do, it closed really, really, really fast. But what was cool about it to me was that we were following the story that we knew, but we weren't just following Bonnie and Clyde. We were following how fucked up America is and why that impacted all these people, their families, parents, but specifically Bonnie. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at the story and a really relevant way right now that, you know, we've been through this recession and everything, and though we're not going through the hardships they're going through, it's sort of similar, and I think it's really interesting to look at that and figure out what was going on. And I think the thing I like about the show the most is that it doesn't judge anybody. It doesn't say Bonnie and Clyde are bad people, which I think makes it uncomfortable for people, which is cool. And it just makes it more interesting.
Well, we're in one of the songs is They Stole Wouldn't You, especially during times like that. And what I thought about interesting of everything you were saying, how it's not just a story about Bonnie and Clyde, I think that really came across in the show of it's not about this love story. You know, most people think it's about this love story between two people, and it's really not about that. It's the monsters that they were created into by the society around them.
And for folks who don't know, the show was originally really different. They produced it at La Jolla Playhouse in California, and it was a love story. There was almost none of this social political context, and it was a decent show. I've seen a bootleg video of it, and it worked okay. It wasn't a show I would have wanted to do, but it was a decent show. And then they closed it and did massive rewrites. They cut like half the score, wrote a ton of new songs, really transformed it into a different animal. You know, that was a love story. This is a story about how time and place can screw you up. And in this version now that played on Broadway that we did, the love story is just given circumstances. That's just something we know at the beginning. They're in love, they're gonna get killed, and that's kind of what we start with, which I think is extremely cool, but that's usually the story, but that's what we start with here. And then we go down a really different road with this story. And in fact, our production is fairly different from the production on Broadway. In that the production on Broadway is still sort of focused on that love story, and I think it's because, you know, all this same staff had been working on that other version. And we really went away from that. We departed quite a bit from what they were doing.
And did you, in the script, did you find anything that made it difficult for you to try to stage this? Because in my opinion, a little bit of the script is a little choppy, and is, especially with how they did it on Broadway, of like they had sliding pieces that come in and out, and things went up and down. I mean, what was the most difficult thing for you when staging it?
You know, I think it was just about figuring out vocabulary. How does this thing operate? How does it look? How does it move? And one of the things, as the Newlanders all know I'm obsessed with circles. I love circles. Pretty primal. It's because of hair that I'm in love with circles. But I realized there was a lot in this show that was about sociological context. It was about community, but the community was not on stage. The opening number, there was no ensemble on stage during the opening number because they don't sing. In our show there is, because I think that's what that song's about. So for me it was just kind of figuring out, what is the core of this thing, without any of the baggage that the original production staff has.
Right.
What is the core of this thing, and how do you make that work? And what you were talking about, the little choppy scenes, there are a lot of them. We've done a lot of shows that have that, and I think we've learned that the trick to that is to use cinematic devices, to use, pans and split screens, and so there are relatively easy stage equivalents for most cinematic devices, and I think people write scripts like that now because we've all watched movies all the time,
Right.
But I think that's the answer to it, which I think they pretty much understood.
Right. And going back to how you said the community in the original wasn't really a part of most of these songs. You didn't see the ensembles, and then the moments when they could have used them, they used illusions to make it seem like people were there holding up their hands, and used projections and stuff like that.
Well, and there were a lot of moments in the show, what I call a Star Search moment, because I'm old, what the rest of you would call an American Idol moment. When, the song would start and they'd be interacting with another actor, but then they'd plow down stage and stand down center and scream at us. And, Bonnie has this big ballad, Diane Ain't So Bad, that's this really important moment. And she's in a conversation with Blanche. The beginning of the song answers a question Blanche asks, but in the original production, Bonnie sang 2 or 3 lines and Blanche left the stage. And I was like, what the hell? Like, it's a conversation, where's she going? And there was a similar thing, the song, What Was Good Enough For You? Clyde starts out the song singing to his father, explaining to his father that he can't be satisfied with his father. Well, in the original, the father left the stage a couple lines into the song. It's like, what the hell? So that kind of thing seems to me obvious, but that kind of thing, we are changing because it just seems like that's what you ought to do.
Right, right. Now I'm going to switch things a little bit, go to you, Jeffrey, and ask kind of the similar thing of, did you find anything in the music that made it difficult for you to teach the actors, or was there anything that what was the most challenging thing for you with the score?
Well, anytime you have a contemporary show and people listen to the soundtrack, one of the things that we have to do is to get that out of people's minds, because we may not want to recreate that particular soundscape. Our band is a little bit different, we don't have space here that we would in a Broadway house, and so we have to make choices about what instruments we're going to have. And then Scott has a very different vision of the show than the Broadway production, which I have not seen. I've heard the soundtrack, I've seen pictures, and I've seen odds and ends, and there was about a 3-minute clip of things that made the rounds that wasn't the bootleg. But it was very clear that we were taking the show in a much more intimate, much more interpersonal direction and I picked up on that right away. I came in absolutely blank slate. This is, I'm new to this company, I'm new to the score, I've never looked at it before I started looking at it to prepare for this.
Right.
And so really the hardest thing has been helping people understand that we have a different sound in mind.
Yeah.
And it's a more intimate sound. We're not going to belt just for the sake of belting.
Exactly.
Where Laura Osnes can, and so can what's his name? Clyde.
Jeremy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeremy Jackson's the only thing I come up with. 15 years older. So anyway, and we're just not doing that here. Matt brought a very particular sound that is operatically trained. Larissa came in with a smaller voice than Laura Osnes, and we wanted to use it differently. And so, we just helping us, I think, understand the kind of sound we were after.
Right. And one example of that is the song Diane Ain't So Bad.
I was just going to say
This is incredibly emotional, intimate moment that Laura Osnes finished down center, really scream singing at us, and she could do that really well. But that's what it was. And we really talked to Larissa a lot about pulling back on that. That's not what we're doing.
Sorry.
You know what, it made it a really intimate moment between Blanche and Bonnie at that point to where
She
it's just.
screamed in my face that whole time.
Yeah.
It'd be terrible to watch. Nobody would want to watch.
Right, and she's just, she's belting by sitting right there at the table the way we have it staged. It wouldn't have had the same impact as it did then, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you can comment on that just as the other characters sitting across the table from her. I feel as if Blanche was connecting a little more than she wanted to. She doesn't care for Bonnie because she's associated with Clyde.
No, but because you get that nice quiet moment there, she does.
Yeah,
they get a
exactly.
connection, it's great. If she were to just be screaming in my face, you'd really get it. You would
Right.
see it.
Right.
And a lot of it too was, if you watch the show, it's a lot of times people are leaving the stage to change into superfluous costumes, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, yes, we will, and actually we could transition to that now. And talking about the time of the show and the place that it takes place, what was the thought process of trying to figure out what costumes these people wear, and especially when most of them play different characters and do different stuff throughout the whole thing, and just trying to do time period, and there were, I'll let you go on that, and then I'll have some more questions for you.
And also money and no money, who has money, who has no money.
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and that always comes down, that's like one of our biggest restraints is budget, which is just how it goes, which is fine. But I found, and I know I talked to you about this before, that sometimes, because what we have to do, we have to do a lot of thrift shopping for stuff, because we don't have the budget to make everything. And so when you go into like the Goodwills of St. Louis, you have to kind of switch your mind. You can't look at stuff like, well, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. You're like, well, this could work. This is something they would have worn in that time period, but it's from the 80s. But wait a second, they had drop waists and they had broad shoulders and they had long skirts in the 80s and stuff like that. You're like, that actually is like the exact same thing.
Right.
So it's kind of starting to look at stuff in a different light that you wouldn't have before. And that could be really difficult at times, and that's why it's really awesome. I think Sarah and I have a good balance with like, well, what do you think of this? Well, this might work, but how about something like that, but more in this color or with this color, and
Modify this, modify
yeah,
that.
Yeah. Like, I know this is huge, but it looks really awesome and we can take it in, to fit
Right.
that actor. And then we also had to, usually Sarah and I, what we do is we sit down and we're like, okay, what does each character need basically? Like, because usually
Right.
Scott is pretty cool about us just kind of sticking with the same one or two costumes with them for most of the show, and then just like adding accessories and things like that, which is very nice. And then you have the more specific characters like our leads who went through changes throughout the show. So like, this kind of happened by accident. We ended up putting Clyde and Buck in pretty much almost the same outfit, which was kind of an accident because they look different off stage, but under lights I was like, they look the same, but it was kind of cool because I was like, they really look up to each other and they're kind of like twins,
Right.
brothers.
Right.
And they start off like poor, and then like the more that Clyde starts robbing and stuff, he buys nicer clothes for Bonnie, buys nicer clothes for himself.
To
So
mimic
there's like
his idols.
idols.
Yeah.
And it was really nice because I have my costume mentor at SLU, Lou Bird, I contacted him and I was like, Lou, we gotta find nice suits, but really inexpensive. Can you give me a heads up? And he was like, just come right our store.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so it was really nice to able to just to have a friend that was okay with that. And so like I went one day and then Sarah came with me another day and we just went and just measured the hell out of everything and took the suits and it ended up just being
This'll work,
perfect.
this'll work,
Yeah,
this'll work.
yeah. Because the thing is that no matter what kind of no matter where on the poverty system you lied, most men have suits. Like even if it was a crappy suit, they had a suit.
Well, and if you had a suit, you had a suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it
that's all
made
you wore.
absolutely no difference that we had the same person wearing one suit for the whole thing. If you
Yeah.
gave him, well, how about we give you a hat or a bow tie or this or that? Because they would be all of the same people in the same area constantly around each other, having all of the same interactions all the time. So
Yeah.
it made sense and it happened, which is fun.
Talk about the Bonnie dress.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing that was, we actually had palette we had to stick to as well, because Rob gave us like color swatches and we had to stay within that. The only people that Scott wanted us to give color to were the leads. And then we came to the Bonnie dress. So Bonnie has a pretty specific dress that she wears in the crime photos. And it could be black, it could be maroon, it could be dark blue, we don't know. But Scott wanted it to be maroon. And I think that ended up being really good because it gives her kind of a pop of color. And we did have to make that, we completely constructed it, and
Let's say we can go grab it from the back.
yeah. Yeah, I have that on my phone. I have a picture on my phone because I would constantly be like, is there anything similar to this? Yeah. But it was cool because, so what we did was we took a pattern and we basically kind of altered it to our needs. It was like some really strange gothic sort of Halloween costume, and we took it, we're like, well, it has the right hemline and it has the right silhouette. And so that's another way of us looking at costumes in a different way. Like, this could work, how can we tweak it to make it what we need? And so we found this really heavy, nice maroon fabric. Is it in the laundry? Oh,
Excuse me for just a moment.
is it in your car?
Nope, it's going to the laundry.
Oh yeah, it doesn't go in the laundry. Anyway, so what we had to do is we looked for like the right color, and then she has this very specific stripy fabric on the arms and the chest, and we couldn't find any fabric at all in the fabric stores that worked. So I was like, switch it up. Let's go find a shirt that maybe we can salvage the fabric from. So Sarah and I went to our good old friend Savers on Watson and Crestwood, where I've now been probably 50 times in the past year, and started looking for shirts with like the similar fabric. We found one with maroon. It's not exact stripes, but it had a kind of a different feel to it. We're like, perfect. And then we just cut it apart and took those pieces and incorporated them into the dress. She doesn't have a collar like she does in the original dress, and it was a lot of trouble. So we just did it. But B, it ended up like Sarah and I never really do things that are exactly how they're supposed to be because we don't want to.
Well,
so
and honestly, neither really do the writers. I mean, if
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
gonna, I mean, because
Right.
some of the, historically, it's not accurate. So, I mean, it's, but you did the best, and she looks amazing in that
Well,
dress,
and the
so-
thing is that
I think it's a different take on
I
it.
like that it's a variation. I like that
Well,
it's
yeah,
slightly different.
and with Larissa because she has a much smaller frame, well, as did Bonnie, but it just, I think it gives her just more of a feminine look than having that big collar. Like she kind of evolved from being this little goody two shoes looking girl to like very feminine lower neckline. Like it just looks better on her frame, I think, than having the so.
And, just another question for you guys, because I know a couple of times Scott and I also assistant directed the show, and Scott and I had multiple times we saw people wearing necklaces and like, is Bonnie wearing pearls? I don't know if she'd be wearing pearls at this time. And I think Marcy had the reaction to us and had had said pretty much, well, they could be family heirlooms. And as soon as we heard that, it was like, well, duh. So everybody wearing jewelry or doing this or that, it could be
And they
gowns,
had
and
money
could go for
at
the
one
suits
time.
as well.
Right.
Yeah, like
And that ties into there's the bit in the show about a brooch,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which feeds into that same thing.
Fun fact, that's Helen's brooch from Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, nice. Nice.
But yeah, like, because before her father died, they probably would have had a little bit of money, so they had jewelry, and so of course she's gonna keep wearing it, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, items like that were very precious back then.
Or you sell it, as everybody had decided during intermission, they sell all of their accessories.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
notice, there are fewer hats, there's fewer fancy things, there's fewer pieces of jewelry, because,
Except for Bonnie.
except for Bonnie, who keeps getting fancier and fancier. Everybody else kind of declines in the fanciness.
Well,
and
they're
Bonnie
stealing from all of
flies
these
in.
people
Exactly.
throughout the show.
Yeah.
So when you see the beginning of Act 2, you'll see fewer things on stage that were there to be nice in the beginning.
Switching gears again, I'm gonna go to Rob. Kind of on the same aspect of the time and just different things of the era that this took place, but also with the script shifting scenes and doing things so much. What was your thought process of what you wanted to put on the stage to represent the beast that is the show?
And another vehicle.
And another vehicle. We just did Hands on a Hard Body. I don't know if anybody
No more
saw it.
vehicles.
But we had a full truck on stage that Rob had built, and it looked real. It was amazing. how we got it in here, I have no idea. I even asked him, and I was still amazed by it. And yet another car, even though it's a half of one, but still, that is still a beast, so.
Well, going back to some of the first conversations that Scott and I had about this show over the summer, we sort of realized that the way the script is constructed, it starts with and it ends with the same instant in time. It's the instant that the machine guns go off and kill Bonnie and Clyde. And so one way to look at the way that the 2 hours or 2.5 hours that the show elapses is their life flashing before their eyes. In doing that and in taking that, it immediately said to me that this needed to be something where they were almost dreamlike visions, where you see a pool of light with just fringe of stuff, little suggestions of where they are. It's not a full-blown set like you do for a King and I. Right. It's a little pool and a suggestion of what that is. So, and then when we started talking about how we're going to stage it, we're moving the actions here and then it's over there, and it's almost, I don't know if the term is right, it's episodic. It's a series of episodes, little things that bounce back and forth. It dawned on me then is that the set needed to, and it was going to look really odd to people with all the lights on. It looks odd right now when you look at it. But it's a collection, a collage of things that are archetypes of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. So you've got grungy brick walls and rusty bars and a piece of a bank facade, not a whole bank facade, just a piece of a brick wall that implies, sort of that typical small town that they're rampaging through, just the corner of the gas station, and that actually is, I tried to style it after Clyde's family gas station in Dallas. So if you look at some of the photos, there are pieces of this that are consistent with that. In fact, it was excellent.
There's the Coca-Cola sign.
Even the Coca-Cola sign on the roof, which was on that real gas station. And then, so I couldn't have done this show as effectively if I didn't do the set and the lights together, because I had to be able to pool the action and pool the appropriate piece of the set at the same time and move from place to place in that way. So that's really sort of the whole genesis, the whole background behind why it was chosen and structured the way it is. Because when I look at it, it's like, man, what a hodgepodge of stuff. But you have to see it under the lights and in the action, and that's when it's different. Right. It's very different.
And several people have said to me, and I think this is so cool, that some people have asked me afterwards, does the car stay on stage all night after they've seen the show? Because it really does disappear when it's not in the focus. You forget it. It's just back there in the shadows, which is really kind of neat.
Well, and again, that plays into that whole, that this is a dream that they're experiencing. All of those things might be in the shadows in the dream, and only one thing is in the focus at the moment. Right. So it's sort of, the whole place is always there in the background. The other thing in tying with Scott's comments about cinematic devices for staging, as I was programming the lights, actually, I found another one that I realized we had to have, and that is, when I first had all the cues written, or had Act 1 cues written, I was stepping through them, and I was watching, I taped it one night just so that I could make sure I had people in the right place and had the light where it needed to be. And so I'd play the video, I'd hit the cue at the right time and make sure that the light was in the right spot. And the light would just go from, going back to what I was talking about, you got action in the sheriff's office and action at the gas station. And then you go light to light, boom, back and forth. And it's like, that's so harsh. And you go back and you watch an old movie from the 30s, and they don't do that. They dissolve through black. And we don't dissolve through black anymore. TV has gotten rid of that. But back in the 30s, they did. So I inserted a black, and originally there was a follow on every one. So it was a 1 second of black. One side would die down, and then the other side would fade up, just like in an old movie. And that pushed the action along from one side to the other. It was that extra momentum that the lighting needed. And what we found was the actors couldn't get out of the way in 1 second. So I had to take auto follows off, and they turned into real blackouts. But that's where that came from, and that's an unusual device for a New Line show. New Line shows tend to never go dark.
Yeah.
And we specifically do that in this show because it's all part of that same metaphor, that same dream sequence.
And not only that, but how episodic it is, like you said, it really is little vignettes here. You learn different information back and forth in all of that, and I think that it really does help in moving it all along and everything like that. And it really works really well together with the music. I don't know if Jeffrey agrees, but for me, I really do feel like it really works well with the energy that comes from some of that underscoring. When it goes black and all you hear is, just deep, dark things, and then it comes back up and we're in a different scene.
Well, the thing is that underscore is so short and so tight. I mean, it's really built for those kind of really, really quick scene changes.
Right.
And so the music helps propel that transition forward because the music is almost always, Scott, maybe always, is setting up the next activity rather than commenting on what is coming through.
Right.
And under Scott's guidance, we've cut some of the transition things as well to make it even more cinematic so that we can go immediately into the next scene without applause interrupting. So by taking out the last 3 bars of a piece of music and allowing, for instance, that incredible reprise in Act 3 where the 3 guys are singing. And we've got that really incredible chord, which in the music has a ba-ba-ba-ba-bum, whack, applause, 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 followed by scene change music.
Right.
We've just taken out the button and whack, and let them sing it, and then go right into the scene change.
Right, and it feels so right, and that's where, telling the actors some nights during notes, it was like, really feel that music afterwards, they sing that note, and then they're like, let's go, and then they, kind of walk off stage, and it's like, really feel it, it's intense, something's going down, and, so then it became that note, and then they're like, let's go, and then it became running off stage. They all had a purpose at that moment, and they were gonna go and do it. And again, it goes with we cut some of the stuff where it's some people, they added few things here and there so people could quick change into other costumes when it's really not necessary.
I know, 'cause I just
Such a necessary costume.
so many costumes, and in the Broadway version, Bonnie only wore her signature Bonnie dress for like a song.
Yeah.
And I was
She was
like,
in her underwear like 97%.
Underwear.
Like they were in their
Oh,
underwear
stupid.
constantly, so you had to cover times for them to go put clothes on.
yeah.
Because you can't rob a bank in your underwear.
They had her in a ton of dresses, and I was like, would she have that many dresses? And they were all really cute, but like way too damn many dresses. That was annoying. And there was one song where she just sung it with her dress open.
Open.
And I was like, all right.
What?
We get it. We see your abs. All right.
But at
That's
least make
enough.
it ready
She
for,
did.
Incredible
at
abs.
least make it ready for quick changes, put Velcro on it or
Yeah,
something, make it
seriously.
quick
Like
so
18
it'll
or
stick
19.
up.
That's just unnecessary.
All right, Gabe, I'm coming to you
Okay.
because if you haven't seen it, we do. It is Bonnie and Clyde, so we do have a lot of guns in this show, and I know
Judy put it, a small armory.
a small armory, as Hamer says in the later. And now they've stolen all these guns. Enough to, yeah. But it just wrangling the actors, making sure and with the timing changes of the lights and all that stuff. I mean, what is the most difficult thing for you? The most challenging thing
I
for you?
will say that we store the guns up above the booth, and bringing them upstairs every night is
Yeah.
probably the most difficult part because
Yeah.
15 guns later,
Do we really have
we really
15
have
guns?
15 guns. It's a lot of guns. It's a lot of guns. But they all, it seems like everyone's, armed appropriately. Clyde, I think, goes through 4 or 5 different guns.
Same with suits.
Yes.
He has a different gun for each suit.
There is, and actually they had a lot of issues with Ray's gun and his holster. We ended up switching that out 4 or 5 times, but kind of wrangling those guns, figuring out who's getting what at what time. That's part of the difficult part, but then as Rob was talking about through that cinematic, those blacks were a little hard to get because we have not done those in New Line shows. Those are brand new kind of thing for me as a stage manager and as a lighting operator to work through those. But as it's grown, as it's progressed, it makes more sense, and I think the actors are definitely sensing that, and the audience gets more of a full picture and a full story.
Right. And I think it really smoothed itself out of when do I get this gun and when do I have this one and when is this here and why am I shooting all these people?
Everyone
we make a joke because it seems like Bonnie, for some reason, always has to pull things from her boobs. So we always call her Mary Boobins. Because I mean, if it's I got a picture here. That's what they call a glamour shot. And, oh, here's my gun, and oh, here's Clyde's gun, and it's just so it's really funny to where we could have thought, you know, cigarettes, like, oh yeah, cigarettes are on the thighs, so.
Lighter's gotta
One
be.
cigarette too.
Yeah, gotta keep it on hand. Oh, you know, you gotta be ready.
Now I'm gonna switch it over to you guys, see if any of you have any questions. I think Jeff does right here.
Question for Gabe. I think the first rifle you see on stage, isn't it a flintlock?
Yeah, it's a long gun. It's a
Yes, yes.
1830s long gun.
And I was surprised by that. I thought that seemed perhaps too far back, but maybe not.
We're assuming that that's been passed down in this family.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what
We really talked about
I
this.
love that he asked
And
that.
they gave it to Clyde because Clyde wanted a gun, and here was a gun they could give Clyde. Pretty much.
Great.
I love that you asked that
So
because
they come out of my phone.
Yes.
Bloody Andrew Jackson.
I have no reason why, but I even told Gabe and Scott, I was just like, I hate that gun. I hate that gun. That was one of my biggest pet peeves. I just thought it was
That gun is so
it was
old.
so long, and yeah, I just didn't like
It
it.
was very long.
Yeah, it was really long.
But I think it makes him look kind of tinier, like he's a
Yeah,
little kid.
right.
I mean, like,
And he is supposed to be younger there.
sorry.
And I will say, other prop-wise, I'm very proud of the chicken.
That
Because
chicken.
I made that
Oh,
chicken and have never made chickens before
I
in my
love
life.
that prop. That's my favorite prop I've
Will you
ever
go
seen.
get it?
Yes. I like watching Kimmy not know how to hold it. She's like, here's a chicken.
Hey, and then I was gonna put a gunshot on it and bloody it up, but then the girls begged me not to, so I ended
Well,
up.
and on that topic, there were some tough props to find for this. In addition to guns,
Right.
Oh, there were tough
We had
costumes.
They're
to find for this.
ridiculous.
we had to
It
carry
was so
magazines.
ridiculous.
Oh, good.
It is so ridiculous.
Kimmy named it Clyde.
Clyde the chicken?
Clyde the chicken.
Gosh,
She
that's
sometimes,
awful.
well, he's better behaved than her son, so
My chicken.
it's great.
Yeah. It's hard to get stuff, I think, to look period on stage and not make it look ridiculous. I think that's a really hard thing to do too. But not make it look like, we're doing that is musical. Like,
Yeah.
because it can kind of go into that, but I think that's why it was so hard.
Well, if we weren't careful, it would look like guys and dolls, and it should not look
Yeah,
like
we
guys and
don't
dolls.
want it to
It's that
look like
simple. Like if you're not careful, people just assume that you're putting everybody wears pinstripe suits with a big flat. It's like,
And I sometimes, I know with this show, because people think like, ooh, we're gonna have a costume, like they're gonna look really fabulous. And sometimes, like at least for me, I have to preface it with, so you're probably not gonna look really cute, except for Bonnie. So just be prepared. You'll probably look a little shabby, but that's okay because it's a character. But you know, actors are sensitive.
Well,
I know I am.
and I think that's all part of the consistency, visual consistency that
Yeah.
we put into the show. You know, you mentioned earlier about a color palette, and actually that was one of the first discussions that we had. And going back to that old movie metaphor, I told the ladies that I was gonna paint the whole set with sepia tones, which I did. Everything's muted sepia tones, which is also different than most of the line shows. Most of the time, the line is pretty brightly colored. And, but it goes with that same metaphor of it's an old movie and so it tones it down, and that immediately takes away some of the glamour that keeps it from guys and dolls.
Yeah.
And it helped us kind of, zone in on what we needed. We'd be like, oh, look at this. Wow, this is way too bright. Like, we'll have to dye it down, like all that different stuff. So it was really awesome working with Rob, and he's so on it that he just like, here are your swatches. And so we'd like pull them out, or pull like, this is too bright, that's too that. So.
And I think Kimmy Short is our props mistress, manager, whatever you want to call her. And she could be here with us tonight, but she was really worried about the same thing, about making sure they went with the sepia tone idea to where, I told her, I was like, well, I'll try to find tan and dark browns for the chicken and like, different stuff like that. And a lot of her other props, the bags that they bring in at different times, they're, they would look, you would think that they could be any color under a picture and not, you wouldn't know what they were. And I think that really came to life in all this as well.
Everything was tea dye ever.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of tea dyeing, yeah. Tea dyeing makes it look nice and shabby, so it's very.
Tea bagging.
Any other questions?
Clyde's hat, I just like to ask about that, because that was the other costume thing that struck me.
Yeah.
Almost as much as Bonnie's dress, was Clyde's white hat. That was, man, I was just wondering how intentional it was. We said he's gotta have the best looking hat.
Yeah.
We actually said, what is the best looking hat from this time period that you have, and that was legitimately the best looking hat.
Yeah, well, because that's it. He idolized Al Capone, and that's what Al Capone would wear. It was a bright white hat. And I know someone was tweet seeding there or something like, oh my God, his plaid vest and his pinstripe pants. He's trying to be what he thinks a gangster is, which is like crazy look. Because we were looking at vests to go with, and I was like, I don't know. No, this is good.
Yeah.
Because like he wants to be flashy. He wants to go, hey, look at all the money I could blow on a crazy suit and a crazy vest and a bright white hat and flower to match. Like that's what he would do because he thinks that's what glamorous killers do.
It's like when you see Steve Harvey get dressed.
Yeah.
And connected to that, one of the things that we talked to the actors about, Bonnie Clyde at the very beginning, was that in the original production there are actual children actors at the beginning being young Bonnie and young Clyde, which when I saw it on Broadway, I'm thinking to myself, I really want to do this show, and I hate children. So I did not want to have any children in the show. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I don't need children in the show. It's only for the first song. It's only backstory. So we decided Bonnie and Clyde were going to play young Bonnie and Clyde. You know, no big deal. But one of the things that I talked about was the reason we meet Bonnie and Clyde at ages 12 and 10 is that that's where they get stuck. They're emotionally and socially and psychologically stunted. They are trapped at that age. And one of the things, and Marissa, you can speak to this, you know, I asked Bonnie and Clyde to play 12. And I was constantly in rehearsal saying, don't forget the 12-year-old, don't forget your 12-year-old. And I think at first they felt like, oh my God, he's crazy, and I'm going to be an idiot doing this. But it really works. You know, it doesn't make them seem 12, it makes them seem hopelessly immature, which is what they were.
And then they grow into being that, which makes them horrible bank robbers. I mean, you know, especially in this show, there's one scene where they're robbing a bank and they're like, wait a minute, this bank doesn't have money? And then they just start arguing with everybody else that's on there for the bank run, and it just, you know, so it wasn't, the only thing Clyde could do right was drive really fast to get away from everybody,
Right.
so.
Yeah, was that weird for you?
For me, no, what it did was it made everything seem like, it made me feel emotionally stunted, like, which is what they were, and it made it apparent that their relationship was not healthy, it was what it was, you know, it just made everything way clearer, like, I didn't have to kind of navigate, oh, this is this big, or she does good, she's
Yeah, Bonnie
stuck.
grows up a
Like,
little.
a little
Clyde doesn't at all.
And even then, it's like this warped idea. It's like good.
Yeah, right, right.
But I think all that feeds into Clyde wanting to wear Al Capone's hat and, you know, being a little crazy in his choice of clothing, whatever. You know, they are kind of fucked up children.
Well, and that's kind of the point. As kids, we always look up to someone and be like, I want to be just like them. And then when you actually grow up, you say, I want to be me, and this is what I want to be, and this is who I am. And I don't think they ever realized that who they were outside of
Well, they
who
didn't
they
get a chance, they were
wanted.
22, you're an
Exactly,
idiot when you're
right,
22.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah,
I was
we're
an
all-
idiot when I was
Right,
12.
yeah.
And the other thing is, Matt. who
You're an
played-
idiot.
Matt, who
You're
plays
lovely, you're
Clyde,
fine.
he and I both watched several movies that we know Clyde saw. The 1930 Billy the Kid, Scarface, Little Caesar, and there was one other big, what's the other one? Public Enemy. And what was really kind of extra creepy about watching these movies with Clyde in mind was that he really kind of patterned his life on these specific versions of these, you know, folk heroes. And you watch Billy the Kid, and first of all, it's a really cool movie. I didn't know about it. But you watch it, and you're like, God, Clyde completely laid out his life patterned after this movie. And how crazy that is, and how kind of scary that
Which
is.
is funny how they met each other, because Bonnie really wanted to be a part of those
Right.
movies,
struggled with that for so long.
We did, we had a lot of discussion about it.
We've done a lot of shows with gunshots in them. Sometimes we have guns on stage with blanks, as we did in Assassins. Sometimes we use starter pistols. Sometimes we use really loud rim shots on the drums. And we talked a lot about how stylized was this show going to be, and what's the right level of reality for the gunshots. And so we finally decided that when there was a single shot, which happens a number of times, that we were going to make it a rim shot, that kind of preserved that slight unreality. But there are 3 big machine gun orgies, which we couldn't do on the drums.
Clancy wanted to.
And we couldn't have done with blanks. So we and also we just wanted it to be just overwhelming, So anyway, so that's how we got that.
I have a question. Why did you just? Oh, I guess if you haven't seen this is a spoiler.
Yes, Race, cover your ears.
I was gonna say,
He has no idea what happened.
this is whatever. It's not spoiler. Okay, so at the end with the big
Right.
of the whole
All right. Sure.
ensemble.
I don't want to spoil it, but Bonnie and Clyde die.
Well, yeah. No, like the end where like the ensemble gets
thanks.
shot.
Yeah.
Why did you add that?
Can I? Well,
So in the show as written, the end of the show, Bonnie and Clyde had this little dialogue scene. They go back, get in the car. Bonnie sings a very brief piece of How About a Dance, and lights fade to black, which I think was kind of a cool ending because we start with them getting killed, so we don't have to do that again. We all know they get killed, right? It's not the point. I thought that was kind of cool. But one night, I think it was before we started rehearsing. One night I called Dowdy and said, "Okay, I have an idea for the end, and it may be crazy." And my idea was Bonnie sings, I think just one phrase, right? At the end?
you'll lose the
You'll lose the
blues.
blues and you may lose your heart. So she sings, "You'll lose, and you may lose," and then we'd stop, have another machine gun orgy, and then she sings the last 2 words. And I thought, I kind of like that too. It's kind of shocking and, kind of reminded me of the horror of all this. And then kind of an extension of the idea was, and then when we hear that orgy of machine gun firing again, maybe everybody on stage dies except Bonnie and Clyde. And then we're left with this carnage. So I present this to Dowdy on the phone, and I was like, "What do you think about this?" And he's like, "Well, let's do it. Let's see what it looks like." I'm like, I don't know. Like, it might be too much. Might be too much underlining, Hey, look at this, look at this. Anyway, so we put it in and we just left it for a while, and I think we all kind of decided we liked it.
I think I thought it symbolized the carnage that was left behind for them.
That's what I was
And it left us at the moment right before they get it. So it left us, we got to see the end of the play at the beginning. And so at this point, they are moments before running into Hamer and all of his crew, and they just don't know it's there. And everyone, this is just the wake of what they're leaving behind. And this is the legacy that they, at this point, now know is what is going to be
That's what
there.
And I think part of what works about it, which I wasn't really thinking about when I was first thinking about it, is that we do the machine gun orgy again, and then Bonnie finishes the last song as if that had not happened. Just as happy as hell. I'm just going to sing the last 2 words now. Pretty song, fade to black, and all that. And part of what I think is cool about it is kind of the cluelessness of the carnage.
Yeah.
They are so completely blind
Well, the
to all this
music ends
destruction and
so
damage they've left.
happily.
Yeah.
That last chord, when we're at whatever he said, that last little
Oh
like,
yeah, little triplets up the end.
so pretty.
So happy.
Anyone else? Questions? All right.
Oh, we got
here we
I
go.
had one, but I came in late, so if we started with this, feel free to.
That's right.
What was it about this show that drew you to it, Scott?
We did talk about this a little bit. For me, I had seen a lot of Frank Wildhorn musicals and hated all of them. It's a little harsh. I think Frank Wildhorn is like Andrew Lloyd Webber. He writes astonishingly beautiful melodies, And I think Wildhorn writes a lot more interesting harmonies underneath than Wiegert does. But I think both of them often work with lesser collaborators. I think they work with sometimes clumsy lyricists, book writers. And for me, walking into Bonnie and Clyde, I bought the tickets going, oh geez, I don't know. The lyrics are so smart and so clever and so well constructed, and the book is so well constructed. Everything about it is just really good storytelling. And from the moment I saw it in New York, I was like, this is a story I want to tell. This is really interesting. This is a story about America. Judy wrote a review a number of years ago about one of our shows, and she said that what New Line does is we're exploring America in the 20th century show by show, which I thought, wow, that's so cool. And we kind of are doing that, and this is another piece of that. This is, we looked at the late 20s and Wild Party, but this is this really interesting little piece of America that we haven't looked at before. And I think that was part of what made it seem really cool to me.
I think even with the last season, it was, Night of the Living Dead was like 50s agriculture at that time, and then Rent was the epidemic and the stigma of those toxic relationships and illness and stuff in like the 80s and 90s, and then you have like kind of modern day Texas and like the economy and the poorer cultures and stuff and hard bodies. So each of them explores a different time and like what people are going through. And even with Night of the Living Dead, we talked about it. It wasn't about zombies. It was about the people.
Well, the
in
living
tragedy.
dead were
Yeah.
not the zombies. The living
Yeah,
dead
just
were these people's
and
tech.
how they react in that environment. Like that's how each of these plays. It was just showing how people dealt with the shit that they were kind of handed in their own
And
time.
it's been really interesting for me to go from Hard Body to Bonnie and Clyde, because we're still in Texas.
Yeah.
Different time period, but both set during terrible economic times.
Yeah.
People struggling with paying rent, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they really are kind of companion pieces in this kind of odd way.
Right.
And they both have vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, and Hands on Hard Body's right before the movie is pre 9/11. The show is
Yeah.
post 9/11, right?
Yeah.
Because this is all pre World War II. So
Yeah.
shit's bad, but it's about to get worse.
Yeah.
It's bad, but it's gonna get a whole lot worse.
So Sky, you've been blogging about the social commentary and the underlying, what we found in the show that was missing from the Broadway production. One of the things that I've noticed, since we're talking about it being about the people, there are only 2 choral numbers in this whole show. Halfway through Act 1 we have a big gospel number, and we open Act 2. And even though we have a lot of people on stage at many points in the show, it is all solos and duets and a few trios and that one quartet and a Dewey Shuffle. And other than that, we get the trio reprise, but the show is so intimate. And halfway through Act 1, the core of Act 1 for me, and it's one of the most amazing sequences I've done a lot of shows. There are 3 duets in a row interrupted by that gospel. And we have that really driving rockabilly duet that Clyde and Buck do. We go to the gospel number, we get all that out of the way, we set up the conflict now, and then we move to the duet between Clyde and Ted, which is that sort of cockeyed waltz that for me is my favorite moment of the show. And every night I watch you singing that in profile. It's so powerful for me. And then we move to that incredible power ballad that these women sing about loving who you love. And it's such an intimate moment to have these 3 duets linked up, each of them saying so much about who those people are.
And yet it's the same
Yeah.
song. You get Blanche's side of it and Bonnie's
Yeah.
side of it and Ted's side of it and Clyde's side of it. And
Yeah. I mean, it's that old Oscar Hammerstein twin soliloquy thing that happen to be working together. Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's really great. Any other questions?
How many more shows can you do with cars?
I promised Rob no more vehicles.
Grease lightning.
No grease.
Oh, God.
Already done Grease.
The only time I'll ever ask is if they ever do Christine the musical. Then we might
Ah!
have
I'm over that.
with that Stephen King aspect of it.
American Graffiti or something.
Yeah.
Cruiser,
Just
Takes
do
place
that.
in cars?
I've been the dogs.
Look at all the
Yeah,
dogs.
yeah,
I
yeah.
saw a dog before he was a kid.
Yeah, that's true.
Though, for Night of the Living Dead, Phoebe was amazing.
It's true.
Let's be honest, the kid sat on a bench underneath a blanket for about an hour,
Yeah.
not moving.
Well, and if you used a kid to be a baby, Bonnie, she would grow up to look like that, so.
That's true, Phoebe was.
Yeah, yeah.
As a stage mom.
I really like not having the children at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like,
Too.
aside from my dislike of children.
It's just them taking off their, because they get shot up in the car in the beginning, and they're wearing their ending costumes, and they have blood, and they have all this stuff on them, and that whole thing of there being kids in there is to cover up, it only is to cover up the costume changes.
So then
It's
she-
the
No one
only
can quick
reason.
change that fast.
So then
No.
she can come in and be the waitress that she needs to
Right.
be.
Well, and I
That's
tell you,
it.
when I saw the show in New York and
What?
when the little girl would make the swap with Laura Osnes, the whole audience would explode into a celebrity applause. And you know, and I just kept thinking, y'all, they're still singing. Shut up.
Yeah.
The lyric is still going.
You're
You know.
right.
Well, it's and I kept calling it the gypsy trade out, you know,
Right.
like because in gypsy when the kids are growing up, they have the strobe lights going off and they're all doing the little dance and then they trade them out, you know, and that's really what it was, and that's what it was for, so that they could have them be there. And it goes with both ideas of making them immature even when they growing into adulthood, and then also going with the idea of their life is flashing before their eyes and they're about to die.
I think what I like the most about it is that they don't substantially change between ages 10, 12 and mid-20s.
And I think that's the point, and I think that's the point in the commentary you were trying to make with it, and it goes with that, and it's awesome.
And thank you for
And
not
you know,
using blood.
We don't have to use blood, because again, it is all stylized.
Mhm.
We
It's not
can use
necessary.
light, and then once we grab that device at the beginning of the show, we were able to use it for some of the key turning points in the story, when Clyde kills his first cop, and the cop stays there in the pool of red splatters on the floor for a whole scene. You know, those devices, what started out as we don't want to use stage blood, turned into something that was a powerful thing on stage.
And to go with that, I think if we would have used bloody, I mean, we use a few things here and there, bloody rags to show that there is blood and stuff like that, but if people would have been overly bloody and we would have, you know, had wounds and whatever and stuff like that, I think that would have shown that there's a consequence to their actions, and I think that's something that they never thought about. They never think about the consequences of their actions unless it directly results to them, and even then it was nothing, you know, they just never thought about that. And I think even in that flashback and the life going through their eyes and remembering all of these things that they did, I don't think it was never, that was the path that they wanted to go down, and that's what they were gonna do. It was,
And
they never.
the more we worked on this, the more I thought about it as a fable, which argues against making it realistic. You know, we're trying to make a point. We're not trying to shock you or freak you out or whatever. You know what I
Make it
mean?
gory.
And because the original production, they had some awesome gore. It was really cool gore.
Like getting beat up.
But I just don't think that's what the story's about.
Yeah, along with the love story, yeah.
And I think it's cool, like, this is just something I'm just thinking about through the process, something about getting able to recreate these people who actually existed, like having the source material of all the crime pictures and the pictures of the cops, like, for Ray's character specifically, like he wore all like light suits, like colored suits, and he was the younger guys with the cool overalls and stuff. But like having all those old pictures and stuff was really, really helpful, because we were able to like go, I don't know, something cool about these people. They're no longer alive. Like they're dead. They're gone. But
Claire
like
died when I was still alive. She was
Really?
still alive when she died in 1989, 89 or 87.
what?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
No,
That's
there's-
crazy.
yeah.
But like something about those people actually existing, it's kind of cool to like bring them back to life on stage. Like, holy crap, they're infamous.
And
They
it was,
really are.
and it's different than Hard Body, to where
Yeah.
most of those people are still alive
I
and
know,
commenting about us on Facebook and talking to us on Facebook, so it's
Yeah.
different, you know, it's
But
really
I think
different.
it's cool to like have those pictures and we get to kind of like honor their memory by like recreating them as accurately as we can on stage and not mocking them.
Well, I still haven't seen a picture of the band that followed Bonnie and Clyde.
They were in the back of the car, but
They're
they jumped ship before, they were like, we don't know them, you know. Any other questions, anything at all, any from the actors, yeah?
What was the thought process with all of the dead bodies staying on stage for as long as they did? As one of them, I feel like an ass. Because
Chris Strahlhun, the Strahlhun skin rug on the ground.
Yeah.
Just because Zany's on stage for a good 2 to 3 seasons.
Zane's got abs because of this show.
Marshall's on
Marshall's
stage.
been on stage for a while.
For a while,
I-
and I'm on there for.
I think it started with you. So for folks who don't make the connection, he's the first cop we kill. And for me, that, because the next scene then is Bonnie saying what's going on, and Clyde sort of tells her that he's killed the cop. She freaks out and everything. And it seemed to me how much more potent that is if dead body stays. And I don't think at first I had figured out what we're now doing, which is Bonnie comes in, Clyde's still staring at the dead body, you know, which is so intense. I love that so much. But part of it was just about, you know, this death is hanging over them all the time, just this horror, you know. And I really, when I started blocking it, I really consciously said to myself, how long can I leave dead bodies on stage? I mean, I really want to do it as long as I possibly could. I did not want to let the audience off the hook. I just wanted death to be there as much as possible.
Well, and I think it also helped to build up almost to the end of where everybody is laying there. And there's another scene when Marshall's laying there, and they're in the hideout or whatever. He mentions that clerk again and says, yeah, just like when Bonnie's reading the poem, and he says, yeah, just like that clerk, blank, blank, blank. You know, he talks about it and refers back to it. You know, when he says, right, sheriff, and you know, and he's got his target, he's gonna take it. And I think it really helped show that, you know, 1 body, 2 bodies, 3 bodies, and I think to have the audience members go, oh my God, they have to walk around that dead body. That one's just laying there behind the couch. I think even however the audience reacted to it, you like it, you didn't like it, it still made you think about that dead body laying right there.
I do
And
like that
then-
he has to talk about his dead brother while his brother is dead on stage. I
Yeah,
killed my brother.
and then
Well, and when you're dead behind the couch, the sheriff comes in and talks about you being killed. And I love that he's challenging Buck and saying, you know, your brother has killed a cop, and there's the dead cop behind the couch.
Behind your couch.
And I think it's just
Really
that
like
it's again, like I said, the audience may love it, they may hate it, but it is a simple reminder they are leaving destruction in their path. And then at the end, when you hear the machine guns again, everyone assumes it's going to be them, just like at the beginning, dying again. Except it's now we see their wake, we see what they've left in their path, and I think it helps build to those moments.
Well, and if you go back to the whole idea that this is a series of flashbacks in their mind, those events overlap. And so allowing them to overlap on stage is important. You leave those
Yeah.
reminders out there.
Right?
I'm curious about the, you know, we're mentioning kind of the horror of the death of the show, and yet another big takeaway for me was the really sweet song that Bonnie sings about dying ain't so bad.
Yeah.
Right? And normally songs like that kind of creep me out, right? Like the MASH Suicide's Painless song.
Right.
But I think she kind of sold it, and I think the show kind of, the story kind of sells, you know, creepy as this is, that short and loving life ain't so bad, or short and exciting life ain't so bad, and that was the way they were living, and that to me is a little bit of the possible interpretation of them surviving in the
in the car for at least a little bit.
Or in the bigger reality, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
They made something of themselves.
Exactly.
When I-
You can't leave your mark by digging ditches, but.
When I first heard the song "Dying Ain't So Bad," when I first saw the show, I remember thinking to myself, God, that's intense. And also, 2/3 of the way through, I thought to myself, I bet my mother feels this way about my stepdad. Well, you know, I mean, she said to me, you know, I hope I die before he does. I mean, I think there are people who legitimately feel that way, you know, because of very intense love or whatever it is, you know. And I think part of, I think it kind of humanizes Bonnie in this really weird way, because it is a like horrible thing if you think about it. But I think it does. I think there are a lot of people in the audience that think, I kind of feel that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we started working and decided to do Quieter, it became one of the most honest moments in the show.
Yeah.
And it really sets up that line that happens just 2 or 3 pages later, where Clyde says, I should have died, or they should have killed me, and Bonnie says, we're going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, she just says it. And I hadn't caught that at all in any of the rehearsals until I was sitting over there in the pit. And every night that line comes up and it creeps up on me. And it's like, she's known all along. Or at least since she decided to stay.
Right.
After the no, I gotta get out of here.
See, and
when
that,
she decides
you
to
know,
stay.
and that made me think too. It's like, okay, well, if they are recreating their, you know, in our version at least, if they are, their life is flashing before their eyes, is that their subconscious speaking through, and it's like, well, they know they're gonna die and stuff like that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was just one of the interesting things that kept popping up in my head. It's like, that's an interesting question. You know, did Bonnie know that they were going to die, or do they know now?
Well,
You know?
she wrote in her poems.
I think she figures it out during, too late to go back, turn back now. In the moment before she's saying exactly that, like
Yeah.
in that moment.
That's the
for her,
transition,
that's
absolutely.
Where she makes
Yeah.
her decision. She
Yeah.
knows they're gonna die then.
And that's why
She's
we
okay.
decided to pull the band back right there as well. Let that be that moment of Brahms turning inward with it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming and being here. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. Thank you all for being here. I know you didn't have to, but that's great. We try to do these with all of our shows, so if you come and support, that'd be awesome. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that goes into making a show, and I think a lot of people need to hear it, and it's just really interesting to hear the ideas that come from these people, and especially as actors too, to hear some of the ideas, especially with Scott getting some ideas that maybe we're not so comfortable with either, but hearing where it comes from and really why we choose these things and why we choose the shows we do, as opposed to just saying we're gonna just do another round of Music Man or Oklahoma. So thank you all very, very much for coming, and if you haven't got a chance to see the show, please come join us, and if you'd like to come again, bring some friends. But yeah, thank you all very much, and yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, go put the chicken back.